It's just a huge honor for me to bring back one of my idols, my role models, a friend of mine for decades. He was the first podcast I ever did, Mike the Man Ditolla. We brought him back at number 200. We brought him back at number 400. And today is going to be, gosh, I don't even know what number we're I guess the last one we put up was 1117. I was thinking you should have been on at 600, 800, 1,000. And you skipped all the way to 1,118. So why? So our viewers want to know, why did you skip 6, 4, and 1,000? Are those just not lucky numbers for you at the casino?
It's no feng shui kind of thing where there's unlucky numbers that I didn't want to do it. I just don't think I got an invitation for you. I would never say no. So I just have to think that for whatever reason, I don't know. It just didn't occur to who was ever organizing your podcast that I was supposed to be on these milestone even number, podcasts, but I would have done it.
Do you think, since it's two bald beauties on here, that this is technically dental porn?
I think to be dental porn, you have to show pictures of highly stylized anterior crowns with white halos and incisal edge translucency and the stuff that never happens in the real world. That's dental porn.
Speaking of cosmetic, you're out there in California where everything's cosmetic. I don't know. I really don't know anybody who knows more about the macroeconomics of the dental lab business. But I just made a post today. The use of gold in dentistry remains significant today, with annual consumption typically estimated to be approximately 70 tons worldwide. The value based on the current gold spot price of today at $12.44 would be $2 billion, almost $3 billion worth of gold a year. You and I, when we got out of school, I mean, we've been out for 3 decades. We never saw the death of the PFM. The PFM was the new thing. And do you think there's still a place for gold? Every restoration in my mouth is gold.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's still a place for gold, most definitely. But as big as those numbers sound, gold is less than 1% of what gets done of the restorations at Glidewell Laboratory. So, those numbers sound big, although I wouldn't know the difference. If you said 60 tons of gold, 6 tons are gold, or 600 tons, it all sounds like a lot to me, but it's less than, just barely 1% of the restorations being done today. So it's a dying art, and it's unfortunate because it's really conservative. And the final nail in the coffin probably for cast gold is going to be solid zirconia, just because it can't do everything gold does, but it can do a lot of things gold does. And now that it's getting to be more tooth colored, not just kind of a snow white color, that's probably the death knell for gold restorations, except for relatives of dentists, where dentists still want to place that restoration in their relatives' mouths.
Now, when you first came on the show, you were the dental director of Glidewell, and we both idolize Jim.
Yep.
Jim Glidewell's amazing. I can't get him on the show though. I've asked him like 10 times. He doesn't even reply. And then you went to Sirona. Yeah. And then when you left Sirona, about a week later, they turned into Sirona Dentsply. And now you're the vice president of clinical affairs and communication at Aegis Dental Network. Yeah. So how's your journey going? Are you having fun where you're at now?
I am, because Aegis has a real dedication to creating this video platform that we're currently working on. So they own 3 great magazines like Compendium that you and I kind of grew up with. They've got Inside Dentistry, Inside Dental Technology. So these are, it's a big brand within the dental publishing business. But Dan Perkins, the CEO, when we first started talking about this project, he said, look at all the magazines. They're getting thinner as time goes on. And granted, they're still the main way that dentists learn things, but you can see this whole burgeoning field of video, whether it's unboxing videos, whether it's clinical videos online, like the kind that we started, 15, 20 years ago at Glidewell. And you can see that video is going to be the way that the younger generation of dentists that are coming in, this is how they're going to learn about products. This is how they're going to learn about techniques. Live lectures aren't going anywhere. They'll still go for the camaraderie of being around other dentists and getting to talk to them. But it's pretty clear to us that video consumption of information, learning about products and techniques and clinical strategies, that video is going to be the future of the way that dentists consume this type of information.
I love Dan Perkins. I really do. I've met him several times because he doesn't think in fear and scarcity. Some of the other dental magazines, like when I walk up to him, hey buddy, what up? You think we're the same. I remember when I got out of dental school, I ran across the street, all excited to meet the 8 dentists that practice across the street and thinking they're going to be your buddies just like dental school. And these are going to be all your future alcoholic, substance abuse enablers. And like half of them like slammed the door, like, we don't need a dentist. And then the other half are like, come on in and, go watch a ball game. And 30 years later, guess which 4 crushed it, and guess which 4 died in fear and scarcity. And I remember Dan and I having dinner one time, and we said to each other, if you throw a great magazine for free at the dentist's office when he's waiting for a hygiene check, he's going to pick it up and read it. Neither of us have ever met a single dentist that only reads Compendium or
Right.
Dental Town or Inside Dentistry. What was the third one you said they had? Compendium, Inside Dentistry, and what?
Inside Dental Technology. It's really the only journal out there that is aimed at the teamwork between laboratory technicians and dentists themselves. So it's when you look at the board members for that magazine, it's a combination of lab technicians and dentists. And so it's the one that really stresses the teamwork and covers the topics that really kind of cross over between dentists and laboratory technicians. And that was my world for 15 years at Glidewell. So it's a world that I'm really fascinated by. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention today is that I wanted to run a concept by you. I truly believe that we have a couple things in dentistry that are very random. The first one is the 6-month cleaning recommendation. Nobody knows where that actually came from, if it was from an Amos and a Pepsodent ad on an Amos and Andy show or whatever it was. And another totally random thing in clinical dentistry is the 2-week time period to get a crown back from the laboratory. There's no scientific basis for this. It doesn't even take a lab, 2 weeks to make a crown. They're lying to you if they tell you it takes 2 weeks to make a crown. And there's lots of problems that happen with these 2-week temporary crowns that we're leaving in. We're having to do way too many adjustments occlusally and to the proximal contacts when we go to seat these crowns. And every dentist knows this, that if you leave a temporary on for 6 weeks or 12 weeks instead of 2 weeks, the chances of being able to seat the crown are kind of slim and none without taking a new impression. And I'm here to tell you, Howard, the opposite is true as well. We should be seating crowns after 3 days, not after 2 weeks. Nothing good happens while the temporary crown is in place. And the longer it's in place, the more of an influence it can have over the permanent crown that's coming in place. We need to be seating crowns after 3 days instead of 2 weeks. And this is kind of what I want to dedicate, the rest of my clinical career to, is making this change in the laboratory industry. Because at Glidewell, for the last 8 years I was there, I sat all my crowns after 3 days instead of 2 weeks, and the adjustments almost disappear, which is great for the crowns, great for the patient. There's a big problem. We're leaving temporary crowns in way too long.
Yeah, and the bacteria seeps in, and that's a big part of the sensitivity.
Of course. Yeah, the bacteria is seeping in because we're using a cement that's designed to fail. We're putting a temporary cement in this plastic. The margins on the plastic crown aren't all that good. There's so many times where a well-meaning dental assistant who's trying to polish this temporary crown and get rid of any sharp edges on there will smooth it, but they'll accidentally take the crown 200, 300, 400 microns out of occlusion. And then 2 weeks later, the opposing tooth is super erupted. And now the crown is 400 microns high, and you're grinding on the Emax or the ceramic material. And so I've been shouting about this for a couple of years, that we need to have a dental laboratory that reflects this. And finally, a couple of friends of mine who actually used to work at Glidewell while I was there, they started a laboratory where that's what they do, is 3-day crowns. And so you send them the impression or the digital impression, and you get the crown back in 3 days, so you can put it into the patient's mouth before the temporary crown has a chance to do all these, awful things.
And who are these guys, and what's the name of their lab?
The name of the lab is 38 Smiles. And it's
numeral 38,
yeah.
38?
Yeah,
38 Smiles.
Yeah, so if you go to 38smileslab.com, that's their website, and it's 3 day crowns. Now, this is for posterior single unit crowns. This isn't a problem in the anterior because we don't have such a critical contact between the temporary and the opposing tooth. And the other thing that 38 Smiles is doing that I love is Rella Christensen, a hero to both you and I, has been railing against the glaze that we put on zirconia crowns. She hates it because, unlike with PFMs, where the glaze was a protective coating on the outside of the crown, the glaze actually wears opposing teeth more than the Brux or zirconia underneath it does. And so if you didn't glaze the crowns, it's actually better for the opposing tooth. The problem has been that if you don't glaze a zirconia crown, it doesn't look very lifelike. And so it's been difficult to get laboratories to try to polish zirconia crowns. It's harder to make them look good that way. It's easier just to slap some glaze in it and run it up in the oven and send it to the dentist. And so Kevin and Cindy at 38 Smiles, the other thing they've committed to doing is they polish all their zirconia crowns rather than glazing the crowns. And this, I told Rella, I lectured for Gordon a couple of months ago, and Rella was in the audience. I said, I have a surprise for you. There's finally a lab that has bought into the Rella story of polishing the crowns rather than glazing them. And this really takes advantage of how smooth the surface of zirconia can be when it's well polished. And as a result, you know, they're turning around crowns in 3 days, and they're sending out Bruxer crowns that have been polished instead of glazed. This is kind of state of the art in crown and bridge today.
Well, let's back up a little, Mike. So you're saying 3-day crown. I want to first go back to same-day crown. How significant is that? Now, I am so old at 56 with what, 4 or 5, I have 4 boys and 5 grandchildren. I had the Cerac 1, which I don't think today anybody would say was a good temporary making machine. I mean, I don't think it made a good temporary. And then I had Cerac 2, and now it's Cerac 3. How significant of the market is same-day dentistry with a CAD/CAM device, whether it be Cerac 3, which is owned by Dentsply Sirona, or Plan Mecca out of has a company in Dallas, Fort Worth. Well, how big of players are these guys?
Well, obviously, Dentsply Sirona is still the big one in that segment, but altogether, they probably have penetrated the market around 15%, give or take a percentage point each direction of dentists who have bought that. That's bought all those systems over time, including the ones that you did. So it's hard to say how many are still using it. And so same-day dentistry, that is kind of, in my world, the ideal way to do it, to be able to put, so if 3 days is better than 2 weeks, there's no doubt that same day is better than 3 weeks. But a lot of dentists aren't willing to invest the money in the technology, and it's really not even the money, it's the change that has to take place in their office for them to incorporate chairside CAD/CAM. You're now asking a dentist, instead of, prepping a crown in operatory 1 and then going to operatory 2 to prep another one, to stick around and help make the crown. And most dentists will tell you that they don't enjoy the process of making crowns. They only made 2 back in dental school. They don't want to be the lab tech. They'd rather go prep another one. So for me, 3-day crowns represents kind of the best case scenario for dentists who aren't willing to make the investment and take the leap and change their office to go to chairside CAD/CAM, but not doing the 2-week temporary crown that we've always been doing. Howard, think about this. At Glidewell Laboratories, we had to design the crowns 400 microns out of occlusion. So most dentists, when they think about a crown being made in the laboratory, they think about it being made in contact with the opposing tooth. What we had to do at Glidewell, and is still being done, is design the crown 400 microns out of occlusion. So that's a 0.4 of a millimeter opening between the crown and the opposing tooth. And even when we did that, we had about 17% of the dentists saying that the occlusion was too high on the crown, even though we were designing it 400 microns out of occlusion. This is when I began to learn that the temporary crown was a real problem, because we're having to leave the occlusal contact completely open, and there's still dentists saying they had to adjust the occlusion too much. That's why 3 days is important, because even if your assistant accidentally leaves the temporary crown out of occlusion by 200 microns, it's got far less of an effect if you're seating the crown after 3 days versus seating it after 14 days.
And what kind of crown are you liking? I mean, when someone sends it to a lab, what kind of crown do you like? Well, and before I state this, I know there's guys who want to talk about full mouth rehab and all on 4, but the truth is, America will do 100 all on none cases called a denture for every one all on four at $25,000 an arch. I mean, for every American that can buy 50,000. I mean, last night I was feeling really excited, so I went to Village Inn for dinner, and I love that place because I'm the youngest person in that restaurant. I mean, if you think you're old, just go eat at Village Inn in Mesa, Arizona, and you will feel like a young kid who just got out of high school. But the most fun insurance date I've ever seen was the 32 teeth and then the dollar spike for the teeth treated. And all it is a flat line with 4 monster spikes on the 4 6-year molars. I mean, that's a tooth most likely to get an MOD, a crown, a root canal extracted, a single implant. So I'm not talking about all on fours and all this, but just podcasters are young. Most of the podcasters are 30 and under. In fact, shoot me an email, howard@dentaltown.com, and tell me how old you are, where you're from, or leave a comment after at the bottom of the YouTube video, where you're from, what country, all that kind of stuff. I love seeing that stuff. But for these young millennials that just got out of school, and for the first 4 years, they're mostly doing molar crowns, first molar crowns. What would your go-to first molar crown?
Well, when you look at Glidewell, Glidewell's a great example. Glidewell works with dentists in all 50 states. They work with on average of 45,000 dentists a month. 45,000 dentists a month order one thing from Glidewell. It's unbelievable. And out of all that stuff coming into the laboratory, 82% of it is single unit crowns. That's coming into crown and bridge. 82%, and then another 9% is 2 unit crowns. So 91% of what's coming into Glidewell, the biggest lab in the world, are 1 and 2 unit crowns. So you're exactly right when you say that American dentistry by GPs, not prosthodontists, but by GPs, is getting done 1 and 2 units at a time. That's just the way it's always going to be. And so for that first molar that you're talking about, or even if it's the second molar, I'm a full strength zirconia guy. I'm a Bruxer, specifically full strength zirconia. And the reason why is Gordon and Rella, well, specifically Rella, now has 7 years of research on full strength Bruxer in that EMAX study that she did with Bruxer and EMAX. Both materials are performing admirably, but Bruxer is outperforming any tooth-colored material that they've ever tested before. It's unbelievable. It's performing like a champ. There's a bunch of new translucent zirconias out there now that are not performing as well, and that's another story. But if I'm doing a molar, it's going to be Bruxer, full strength, the original solid zirconia for the molars. And when I go anterior for that, it's going to be EMAX anywhere else. You could use EMAX on that first molar, but that requires you to reduce more. That requires you to bond the crown into place rather than cement it. And the recommendations that I make, because of my history at Glidewell, I make recommendations for the average dentist out there. I'm not making recommendations for the top 2% of dentists. So for the average dentist out there who I haven't met, I have to go with Bruxer, full strength, original formula zirconia on molars. And then you can use EMAX press everywhere else, because all the anterior teeth have about 1/3 of the biting force that you see in the posterior teeth. So I'm EMAX in the anterior and then Bruxer on the posterior.
Did you know I'm in the top 1% dentist for body mass index?
Yeah, I saw that you, I know that had been your goal for a while and you were having trouble getting to the top 1%. Congratulations.
So Bruxer, though, isn't that a name brand that you have to use? Isn't that Glidewell's Bruxer? When you say Bruxer, like that lab you're talking about, 38 Smiles. I mean, can they do a Bruxer crown? I thought that was a...
Yes. No, Glidewell sells Bruxer to about 210 outside laboratories who buy it from Glidewell and use it as well. And the only reason I say Bruxer is not because I was at Glidewell for 15 years and not because I was on the team that launched it. It's the only zirconia that's been as tested for 7 years clinically in the CR study, or the TRACK study, I should say, that Rel is doing now. I truly believe that other full-strength solid zirconias are going to perform as well, but I just can't say it with the kind of confidence I can for Bruxer, because it's been in Rella's study with 0 failures on molars for over 7 years with feather edge or slight chamfer margins. It's really, it's unbelievable. It still blows me away what a great material it's ended up being.
And what would you cement that zirconia with?
Anything you want. Anything you want. Could be Reliax luting cement, could be Ceramer. You could go take a step up and do like Speed Sem from Ivoclar Vivadent. It's so strong, it doesn't care. If you still had Flex in your office, you could pull that out of the refrigerator and use that. You could use Duralon if you wanted to use that. It's such a strong crown.
Oh, please don't say Duralon. I get an ulcer every time you say that. You want to know how ancient I am? When I got out of school in '87, the biggest wig out there, and I'm not going to say his name because it'll come back to haunt him. I'll just say he practices in Clearwater, Florida, but the big deal at the time, he got burned too, was Dicor cemented with Duralon. So when a beautiful woman came in and wanted these gorgeous crowns, it was Dicor and Duralon. Guess how many of those that I cemented fractured and had to be replaced for free?
I'm going to say 102% because I think I think one of them exploded and broke the opposing tooth at the same time.
And then we lived through tetric ceram, and there was art glass. I mean, right. Are dentists still guinea pigs for new product development? I mean, does it come out of somebody's idea and then next thing you're doing it fee for service crowns, you're doing them on your mom and dad? I mean, how long did it take you to figure out tetric ceram was not a good idea, or art glass?
Well, we were doing art glass to metal at Glidewell, and the art glass kept falling off, and the manufacturer said it was our fault. But what we knew it wasn't. We were even putting additional mechanical retention onto the crowns that the company wasn't asking us to do, and it was still falling apart when you soaked it in saliva. So the crowns worked really well in people with xerostomia. That was the main indication, was anybody who would run out of saliva. These crowns would last until as long as they lasted. But they, in a sense, dentists kind of are guinea pigs when it comes to indirect restorations like that at times. You know, people think that we invented Bruxer. I mean, we did come up with Bruxer, but solid zirconia was already being used in Europe by Zircon Zahn. We really just introduced it with a lot of marketing to the United States market and got really good at doing it. But yeah, there's hardly a day where I don't fall to the ground and kiss it and say thank you, because Bruxer has worked out so well.
But the point I was making for these young kids, I mean, if you're listening to this under 30, trust me, I know when you're 30 years old, you think you're smart enough to rule the world. But when you're 40, what percent of the stuff you believe now at 50, you look back on your thoughts at 30 and just think those are ridiculous? And what I'm telling you guys is that when I was young, I tried all the new stuff. I tried the tetric ceram by Eva Claire, the art glass by Horace Kulzer, the Dural. I tried all these things. And now, when you're a grandpa, you say, let all those little kids who graduated last week from dental school, why don't they try all that for 5 years and then get back to me? I mean, I don't want to be a guinea pig. Your patients don't want to be a guinea pig. Learn how to separate bleeding edge technology from leading edge. Like, they still come to my office and want me to switch my Impergum to an oral scanner. It's like, dude, it's a $17 impression. I sent it up the street for a $98 Bruxer crown, and now you want me to change that with a $17,000 scanner, and then you want me to buy a $200 a month software agreement. Hell, that's $2,400. In fact, $2,400. Let me get out my trustworthy calculator. $2,400 divided by $17 an impression. Hell, I can take 141 impressions just for the software agreement. So just separate bleeding edge from leading edge. You want to be high tech, but you don't want to run your local family experimental dental workshop.
Right. Well, and if you love technology and you want to use it to show off to your patients, there's nothing wrong with digital impressions. But every crown that Gordon Christensen, Frank Spear, John Coyce, Bill Strupp, Bob Lowe, whoever your clinical mentors are, 99.999% of their dentistry has been done amazingly with polyether and polyvinyl materials, so they aren't broken. But if you want to get into digital scanning because you think it's cool, it does help with the 3-day turnaround. If you want to get a crown back in 3 days, it's much easier to do with a digital scan because you get rid of the whole day of shipping, getting it out there. And just to your point of bleeding edge, this study that Rel is doing at TRAC, where Bruxer and Emax are performing so well, keep in mind that Emax is Ivoclar's third crack at lithium disilicate. You know, the first time they did it, it was called Empress 2, and it was a lithium disilicate substructure that had ceramic on it. That didn't work, and it was taken off the market. The second time it was called IPS Eris. It was a lithium disilicate with a different veneering ceramic. That didn't work and was taken off the market. And then they had their genius stroke which was to use it as a monolithic material with no porcelain on the outside. And boom, Emax takes off and changes the world in 2007. So even an incredibly successful product like that had to go through a couple iterations to get where it is. Now, that said, you and I practiced in an era where we had so many all ceramic failures. You didn't even mention wool ceram, another one we did at Glidewell that failed spectacularly. And all ceramics used to come in all the time, and a company would have an all ceramic, and they'd come tell our PFM department, hey, sorry, man, this is the end of PFMs. And Rudy Ramirez, our PFM manager, would just laugh and go, yeah, I've heard that before, because there were so many bad, failed all ceramics, one after another. But all of a sudden, starting with Emax in 2007, then Bruxer in 2009, there's this new category of high strength all ceramic materials, but the market still tries to come out with weaker ones, things that are weaker than Emax. And most of them are for CAD/CAM machines, but they try to get labs to buy into. But Emax has set the new bar for the lowest minimally acceptable single unit crown material in my world. So the 30-year-old dentist today, while they should be leery of certain things that come out, probably the one area they don't have to be leery of, believe it or not, is all ceramic indirect restorations, because right now that has gotten really good with the combination of lithium disilicate and solid zirconia, but there's plenty of other areas where there's going to be new products that don't do so well. And so, it's always been for us about 5-year clinical results. Sometimes it's hard to kind of wait 5 years and see what those results are going to be. But yeah, it always behooves you. That's why subscribing to something like Gordon's newsletter, to the CR newsletter, is still a great way to get the most unbiased information you can get. Reviewing
the CR newsletter. My God, why did they leave it called CRA? I still have to convert that in my brain. Like CR newsletter. Oh yeah, that's CRA. So Mike, would you call digital scanning, would you call it bleeding edge or leading edge right now? If you're a 30-year-old millennial, you open up your office, they grew up on technology. I even had Ross Nash and his wife Deborah Englehart were telling me that they think the fact that the kids grew up just playing video games, that they actually have less dexterity, less artistic ability. Ross thinks the baby boomers, just the way they raise his kids, learn more muscle memory and hand dexterity than someone who's only had their hands on a remote control. But if you were 30 years old and you grew up on a Xbox, is digital scanning bleeding edge, leading edge? What would you recommend?
To me, bleeding edge means the price is going to be exorbitantly high, and it may not work all the time because it's such new technology. Leading edge would be prices have already made that initial drop from when they were super expensive, like we used to see with the $38,000 intraoral cameras when the first one came out. And it needs to be reliable and work 99% of the time. And commonplace, would be, or common edge, whatever we want to call that one, is when it's in the hands of at least 50% of the doctors. So I would say it's leading edge. They all work. The 6 commercially available systems, I've used them all at Glidewell. We owned them all. They all work. They've all got advantages. In fact, the funny thing about it is, most of those digital impression systems will do 5 or 6 things really well that nothing else can do. The one thing they don't do very well is take impressions. and so when it comes to measuring how much you've reduced between the prep and the opposing teeth, they're great at that. They're great at letting you have remote connection with your laboratory technician where you can prep 7 through 10, scan it, and let your technician see it while the patient's still in the chair and ask them, do you want me to prep any more or round anything off for you? There's all kinds of great things you can do with that. But when you look at Gordon's criteria, faster, easier, higher quality, more affordable, you got those 4 criteria. If you hit all 4, you'll be a runaway success. If you hit 3 of them, you'll be a great success. If you hit only 2, you're going to struggle. And if you hit 1, you're dead in the water. And is it faster than a conventional impression? No, it's not. It takes 25 seconds to squirt polyvinyl around a tooth and stick a double arch tray and have them bite together. Is it easier? No. You have to take better care of the tissue with digital impressions than you do with a standard impression technique. Is it higher quality? Yes, it is higher quality. It's about 1% more accurate than the combination of polyvinyl, siloxane, and Dystone. And is it more affordable? No, it's less affordable. So currently in the state they're in, it only meets one of them. They can't be, it's a niche product. It can't be a runaway success because it doesn't solve enough problems for dentists. It actually creates a couple of problems without solving problems that dentists don't have, because polyvinyl and polyether are reliable. They're easy. Everybody knows how to use them. You don't have to be as particulate with the gingiva and keeping it dry as you do when you're taking a digital impression. So until there's a technology that will see through tissue, see through saliva, see through blood, and can honestly take an impression of the opposing arch, the prep, and the bite in 27 seconds, like a regular conventional double arch impression does, then it's going to be stuck kind of in this niche mode. In fact, they're not selling very well. Align's really the only company selling them, and it's because they're tie-in to their aligners. But that brings me to my question I want to ask you, Howard. I feel like I get to ask you one question while we're doing this, and that is, have you been seeing all the ads for Smile Direct Club on TV?
Yes.
Now, this is, remember, you and I used to give praise to Denmat because they were taking out full-page ads on the back of People magazine for their luminaires. And so even for dentists who didn't do luminaires, at least Denmat was spending this money with a direct-to-consumer campaign to tell our patients what luminaires were. And then they would come in and ask us, do you do those? And you'd say yes, or you say, oh, we do something just like them. But thank God Denmat was out there educating patients, so at least they knew what a veneer was. But I don't think we've ever seen a direct-to-consumer push like we're seeing now with Smile Direct Club. It's unbelievable how often these ads are running. And I want to get your take on what you think. As you might imagine, orthodontists are up in arms about this, and there's 39 state dental boards that are suing Smile Direct Club. But you're always an out-of-the-box thinker, and you see the big picture better than anyone else. I want to see what your thoughts on this, because it kind of reminds me of, you remember when we were doing all the bleaching in the office by making custom trays? And then one day Crest was going to release white strips and dentistry just went nuts. It was like, oh my God, how can they do that? Boycott Crest. Every dentist wanted to boycott Crest because they were going to start selling whitening strips over the counter. And now that happened, 20 years ago, no one really thinks about that anymore. And yeah, there's some patients who do that, but dentists still provide that bleaching in their office. What are your thoughts on Smile Direct Club and this concept of going direct to consumers with orthodontics?
Well, a couple things. You mentioned that Gordon always says his 4 rules are faster, easier, higher technology, lower in cost. But in MBA school, that comes from the 5, and the 5 is miniaturization. I remember when you worked for Glidewell, you didn't like Glidewell's own intraoral scanner because it was too big. Remember, it needed to get small. So, the first steam engine was so big it could only pump water out of a coal mine. But as it got faster, easier, higher quality, lower price, and smaller, eventually it fit on a ship and shipping and then a train. So these scanners got to get smaller. But back to your deal. Basically, there's 323 million Americans, and only 5% have ever got ortho. Because the one thing the orthodontists, they've gotten faster, they've gotten easier, they've gotten higher tech, but they never lowered their cost. And so when the average ortho price in America is $6,500 a case, this is America. There's a lot of dentists listening to this podcast right now that do not want to cough up $6,500 for anything. They got student loans, they got a house, they got a pregnant spouse. So what's neat about Smiles Direct Club is they figured out a way to do it for $2,500. You go into a Smiles Direct Club. There's 4 or 5 of them around town here. I'm trying to do a podcast with the CEO of Align Technology, which owns Invisalign iTero, Joe Hogan. But the guy doesn't return any of my emails or phone calls. And because he probably thinks I'm going to sit there and take the party line of the orthodontist. And hell, the average dentist is making $174,000 a year, and the average orthodontist is making over $300,000 a year. There's no one in the government. We have 5 dentists in the U.S. Congress. They've never been a president. They've never been to Supreme Court. They've never been to the Senate. But 5 of them are in the United House of Representatives. And if you talk to any of those guys, there's not any sympathy for a bunch of doctors making $300,000 a year. But since they have figured out a way, Smiles Direct Club, which should be an interesting IPO, you go in there, someone who's not a doctor scans, and then they send you at home 20 trays, and it's $2,500. If you cut that price at $6,500, only 5% of Americans got ortho. At $2,500, you would have to think, what percent, lowering that price $6,500 to $2,500, no one knows, but what percent more of America will have access to straighter teeth? What would you guess? You think that'll pick up? GM, they had a high price Cadillac. They didn't sell very many. The lower price Buick, a lower price Olds, a lower price Pontiac. And what do they sell the most of? The lowest price Chevy. So at 5%, the Cadillac 6,500, dropping that price to 2,500, you're looking at a somewhere between a Pontiac and a Chevy. It's probably the Chevy. Right. So how much more of America do you think will get access to straighter teeth with clear aligners? What's your guess?
I don't know. I don't know if it'd be 25% or what it would be.
Yeah, it definitely go double digit.
Right.
It'll definitely be double digit. So at the minimum, you and I agree, it's going to be another 10% of America get straighter teeth. And what I like about that is just human psychology. When people don't like their teeth, they don't brush them, floss them, they don't go to the dentist. And my main takeaway when bleaching came out, which was by Omnigel out of Arkansas back in '87, was that, my God, you bleached some kid's teeth, and now he's looking at them. Are they whiter? Oh, what's that black dot? Oh, that's a cavity. Now he's coming back in, and he wants that. Then you tell him, well, you need to get him clean. So with humans, they're either all in or they're all out. You either own your own boat and jet ski and go to the lake every weekend, or you ain't been to the lake one time in 10 years. And I think a bunch of people starting to get their teeth straighter is going to make them more. But the orthodontists, again, they'll do anything. They want to market for new patients. They want to do all these things. But you know what they don't want to do is come down on the price of their ortho.
Right.
And that's why competition is right there at their door, beating on it.
Well, then you're probably going to really like my new idea called Endo Direct Club. And this is where we send the patient a handpiece and some endo files, because I've been doing it for 30 years and I'm still not that good. I figure they can do it just as well as I can. But actually, my issue with it is I'm just not a big fan of removable aligners. You know, you and I went to Rick Litt's course, Brock Rondeau's course. We both started doing ortho within a couple of years of getting out of dental school. You and I both know that if you want to move a tooth, actually move a tooth, you bond a bracket to the front, you put an arch wire in, you put an elastic on, and you move it. And the difference between that and a removable aligner. So I've never liked removable aligners because all you can do is kind of tip teeth and you can't do the same complexity of cases. And I never feel like I had the same control as with brackets and arch wires. And so the funny thing to me about patients doing it at home is it goes to show just how innocuous removable liners are and just how little they do. Like if you could actually move teeth around in a serious way like you can with brackets and arch wires, they would never let patients do this at home. It just goes to show that it's not really doing all that much to me, and it can't do much damage as a result of that. I'm still I like 6 month smiles. I don't know if you had much experience. I know Ryan Swain helped grow that business on Dental Town, and I still do some work with 6 month smiles because to me they represent the best model of all, where you have total control over moving the teeth. You can do more things with it versus the removable aligner market. And so with patients doing it at home, I'm hoping there's a DenMat effect where you have a patient who sees, and by the way, the dentists who are providing 6 month smiles typically do it at about half the price of the fee you quoted for the orthodontist, because they're not moving posterior teeth. They're simply doing anterior teeth to give that patient that better smile that they want. They're not correcting posterior crossbites. It's all being done through IPR. 5% of their time, there might be a lower anterior extraction or something like that. So I'm hoping the net effect is patients sit at home, they see a Smile Direct Club ad, they come to the dentist and ask about it during their cleaning, and they say, well, we don't do something like that, but we have a system we do in 6 months with tooth-colored brackets, tooth-colored arch wires, and clear elastics, where we have more control and we can move things quicker, and then we'll finish you in those kind of removable aligners, and that'll be your retainer. So I still lean towards fixed appliances, anterior focus without doing the whole mouth like you and I used to do. So you're not working on kids and adolescents. You're just working on adults, just concerned about anterior teeth. It's cosmetic related ortho. That's where I really think most dentists should be getting involved and bringing this into their practice. How long was your ortho education in dental school? Was it 13 minutes like mine?
Yeah, and it was all based on the craniofacial embryological development. I mean, just all this stuff that didn't apply. But you're so right. It's all case selection. I mean, if you're just doing adults, you know, when you're taking a Panosef on a 12-year-old and trying to predict where they're going to be at 18 to 21, you got to be pretty damn smart. But just mild crowding, that you stay away from, long faces, open bites, class 2s, class 3s. And you're right. They're just, the patient's just sitting there with a mirror, because what's tough about being an orthodontist, the first 20 months of ortho It's pretty easy. All the stress is in finishing the case, just the detailing. So if you're dealing with patients with lowered expectations and, the mild crowding anterior, they're looking in the mirror, they got a lot better. That's a faster, easier case. I mean, Smiles Direct Club's only going 20 trays, but a lot of orthodontists that when they're doing Invisalign to actually get it detailed, finished, closed, they're doing more like 30 trays.
Right.
And the difference between 10 trays, close, works in hand grenades and right. Anterior crowding. Hey, I want to go back to scanning though. You're so genius. When I talk about oral scanners, you actually said there were 6, which means there's not 5, there's not 7.
There's a lot more than 6. There's 6 main oones in the U.S. right now.
But one of my biggest complaints on my podcast is he didn't say which one. So she's 30 years old. She's driving to work. She wants to get an oral scanner. But you go. She wants to know. Mike Ditolla, if I was going to buy an oral scanner, which one? They want me to hold the feet to the fire. They don't like it when people use generalization. They want.
All right. Well, okay.
So go through those top 6 scanners, sir.
Well, right. I'll give you a couple of them. Okay. Because it's kind of like it's like asking what's a better car, a Porsche Panamera or a Ford Focus? And it's like, well, it all depends what you're expecting out of this experience. In my opinion, the 2 top scanners on the market easily, I don't even think there's an argument, are Dentsply Sirona's OmniCam and 3Shapes Trios. These are 2 great scanners that, and I might even give the nod to the Trios. I think the Trios is probably a better product. I just don't think they have the kind of support that you get from Dentsply Sirona. But both of these are over $40,000, but they allow you to do the most things with them and integrate with different systems. But you're going to pay for that opportunity to be able to do that. And so maybe you'll say, well, I don't have any aspirations of ever doing chairside CAD/CAM crowns, and I'm definitely more value focused. And certainly the most affordable way in is with 3M's True Definition. But so that's the one that you kind of referenced earlier when you said around $15,000, and you mentioned something about a data plan. That's part of the reason why it's so cheap up front, is that there is 2 data plans actually, depending on whether or not you're going to do implants and other stuff. That one happens to integrate with Align technology, so you can send ortho impressions over there. But the downside to that one is it's the only one out of the 6 that still requires powdering. And so for a lot of dentists, they're just like, no, I'm not going to do it because it needs powder. I actually respect for 3M for keeping the powder with it. That shows how dedicated they are to getting the best result with it. And even if you have an OmniCam or 3Shapes Trios, there's definitely times where you're scanning something and the scan just doesn't look great, and it always helps to powder. Just a little dusting of powder gets rid of reflections from like gold crowns or other metal in the mouth. Almost every scan that you do could be improved in terms of accuracy with some powder. It's just that all the systems have gone powder free because that's clearly what dentists want to do. They don't want to deal with the hassle of powder. So I respect 3M for sticking to their powder guns, even when it's a super unpopular decision to make. It just shows they're kind of committed to the quality of it. So that's the lowest entry price, but you're going to pay that data fee. And then you've got the Plan Scan one, you got the CareStream one in there as well, and Dental Wings has one, and there's 45 other ones if you're going to go to the IDS meeting in Cologne, Germany, and see those as well. The message is they all work. They'll all do what you want them to do. And really what you need to do is go to a big show and see how they feel in your hands. See how intuitive it is. See if you can actually take an impression without having to ask for a rep to demo it for you. See if it's like an Apple computer where you can just kind of figure out your way through it on an iPhone by touching a few buttons. What feels comfortable in your hand? And why do you want to do it? What's your reason for getting involved with this? Don't ever let a rep selling digital impressions tell you that you're not at the standard of care if you're still doing polyether or polyvinyl. That's complete, bull. That's just not true. The gold standard is still, polyvinyl, and if you have to go subgingival, polyether, because it's actually, not nearly as hydrophobic as polyvinyl is. And so those are what we've used for generations, and they still work. You can get a crown back quicker with digital impressions. You can share information with your technician. You can see how much you've reduced, and if you've reduced enough for an Emax crown or a zirconia crown. So there's a lot of ancillary reasons to get involved with digital impressions, but by no means feel guilty at all if you want to stick with polyvinyl or polyether. You're not behind the curve. You're not doing lesser dentistry. That's just not true.
You know what I love most about 3M though?
What?
Oh, you know, don't you?
No.
When I go visit my sister's at the nunnery in Lake Elmo. So when I fly to Lake Elmo to go visit my oldest sister, Mary Kay, I have to do 4 hours and 1 minute of business to make it tax deductible. So I fly into Minneapolis, St. Paul. I go talk to the R&D department at 3M for 4 hours and 1 minute, or I go to Patterson. Remember when it was Pete Frechette used to be the CEO?
Yeah.
Oh my God, he was so fun. He would give me the whole 4 hours and 1 minute. But back to you said iTero. If this young millennial wants to do a bunch of Invisalign, can she use, what do you think of the iTero for single unit crown and bridge?
Oh, absolutely. It's come a long way from their initial one. That was the first commercially available system in the US. And when I got that, we used to call it the dustbuster because it was about the same size, shape, and weight as a dustbuster, and you were shoving it into somebody's mouth. And I remember telling the rep, I said, God, the tip is so wide. It's just like hard to get in the patient's mouth. And he said, yeah, a lot of our doctors like how wide it is because it helps keep the tongue out of the way. And I'm like, oh, that's some real rep double speak there. That's some bragging about why the tip is so wide. But as time's gone on, it's gotten lighter. It's much easier to handle as well. They're definitely selling more scanners than anybody else. So they've got this robust network. They've always had the best models. You know, if you're not going to do things model free and still have a model, that iTero model is gorgeous. But the whole industry is moving away from models because we really don't need them anymore if we're doing if we're going to be scanning it. And the other thing about scanning is that just know that all your labs are using it. So even if you take a polyvinyl or a polyether impression, your lab's going to pour it up in dental stone and scan it because they immediately want to get it into the digital environment because they've got all those 30-year-old employees that you were talking about, Howard, that grew up playing Xbox and Nintendo. When you walk through Glidewell now, the average age of somebody designing a crown has gone down 15 or 20 years. In fact, there's probably not even a ceramist in the Glidewell building anymore because we don't use any ceramics for the most part. Everything's a monolithic restoration. So the labs have totally bought into scanning. They've proved that it's a technology that works. If you want to get it in your office, just get the one you like the way the interface looks and how it feels in your hand, because if you don't like how it looks and feels and don't want to use it every day, you're not going to use it. It almost comes down to which one do you think looks the coolest and it's going to turn you on about using it.
Well, Mike, but I'm going to hold your feet to the fire because this is Dentistry Uncensored, and there's a real dilemma out there. You know, you mentioned on, I think you and I both agree that probably the best oral scanners, the 3Shape Trios, but they're in a huge lawsuit with Align Technology because Align Technology wants to support iTero. So some of these scanners aren't going to be open source working with each other. If you want to do Invisalign, would you just say you should use the iTero because that's the big dog Align Technology? Or do you think 3Shape will make enough connection with other clear aligners? You just do Invisalign will be the brand name. The patient will ask for Invisalign, but you say, yeah, I got a scanner, it's 3Shape, and I'll do another clear aligner. How would you address that specific concern?
If you want to do a lot of Invisalign cases, I have two suggestions. One is take a 6-month Smiles course so you can see what it's like to really move teeth with arch wires and brackets, because don't just know how to move teeth with aligners. It's just totally different. You and I went through it the real way. I mean, we were working on kids and adolescents, and we saw everything ortho had to offer. So by the time you get to aligners, the principles of orthodontic movement are well cemented in your head. But if you want to do a bunch of Invisalign cases, yeah, get the iTero. I don't know why you wouldn't. It's kind of like when people used to want to use iTunes on a PC or use iTunes with a phone that wasn't an Apple phone. If you love somebody's environment, stick with their hardware and their software. So in this case, if you're a big Invisalign provider and you want to go digital, then absolutely go with the iTero, because you can still do crown and bridge with it when you start doing that, but it's a great pipeline into that Invisalign. So yes, there are times. And frankly, if you want to do chairside restoration, perhaps at some point, I have to vote for my old employer, Dentsply Sirona, and the CEREC system. I think they have the most robust start to finish system. If you're going to be using that scanner with a mill, you'd like the scanner in the mill to be made by the same people and have them make the software so you don't have issues between, oh no, that's a mill problem, no, that's a scanner problem.
So you mentioned 6-month Smiles a couple of times. That on the website, it's actually the numeral 6. So it's numeral 6monthsmiles.com.
Yeah.
She's never heard of 6monthsmiles.com. Why do you specifically mention that one? What are your thoughts on 6-month Smiles?
Well, it goes back to the early Dental Town days, you know, and when you and I were doing these big comprehensive, remember those ortho classes we were doing out in Phoenix? There were 4 or 5 4-day weekends. I mean, it was really a lot of depth, and we did it with Rick, and then we did it with Brock Rondeau and got into it. Then you would do cases and come back for follow-up ones. And so you got all of this knowledge. And for me, it was kind of too much ortho. I kind of almost felt like a specialist at times because we were doing functional appliances for kids and doing all this other stuff. And for some of the people who took the class with us, they really loved it. But my passion was more about straightening front teeth. That's what I wanted to give patients smiles. And so when I started seeing patients in hygiene, this happens all the time where you see somebody who's had, you know, they're stable, they don't have a lot of caries, but their lower anterior teeth are crooked. And they say, why are these teeth getting crookeder? And you say, well, all teeth want to move downward and forwards. And did you have ortho? Yes, I did. Where are your retainers? I haven't worn them in 20 years. And it's like, well, back in those days, they didn't do permanent retention from 22 to 27, but that would have been nice. But I found that most of the cases I was doing was on adults who wanted to straighten their own teeth, and it was just anterior changes to give them a good smile. We would combine that with bleaching almost all the time, or sometimes with minimal prep or no prep veneers. And so I kind of evolved over to 6-month smiles because it was very easy for me to talk to other dentists about doing it. Like if you remember, Howard, when you and I started doing this, remember we were placing all the brackets by hand on the teeth. We had the bracket measuring tool from the incisal edge, and you try to line it up with the long axis and get it all right. And you could always move the bracket later. 6-month smile is all based on indirect bracketing. So it's kind of like having a surgical guide for placing an implant. So you send the patient's models to 6-month smiles, they bond the brackets onto the model, then do a suck down over it, send it back to the dentist. So now you just etch the tooth, you know, rinse it, bonding agent on, cement on the bracket, seat the stent down, light cure them all, peel it off and clean up the extra cement. So it's the lab that's actually putting it together. They have a product called Confidex, which is a team of orthodontists that diagnoses your case and tells you what to do appointment by appointment. It's great hand-holding for dentists who got 0 or almost 0 orthodontic education in school but want to get involved with this. And the reason it bothers me, Howard, is that I personally did too many cases as veneer cases that could have been adult ortho cases. And we see these cases coming into Glidewell as well. And people say, you know, no prep veneers. Well, no prep veneers are very conservative compared to prep veneers. But what's even more conservative than no prep veneers is limited adult orthodontics to just the anterior teeth, where we're creating some space with IPR, having tooth-colored brackets and arch wires on for 6 months and straightening things out and bleaching them. And that's truly conservative because even with no prep veneers, the patient's kind of married to this restorative result and they have to be done every 10 or 15 years. So you and I took these comprehensive ortho classes and I didn't love doing that. What I ended up love doing was aesthetically focused, anterior, limited orthodontics on adults, and that was Ryan Swain's 6-month smile story. And so that's kind of how I fell into it and got involved with it. And I still talk to dentists now who not only don't have any orthodontic training, but instead of doing 25 crowns to graduate like we did back in 1988, they're doing 6 crowns and graduating from school because there's less patients and less time. And so they're coming out without a lot of clinical confidence. And it's fine. You can always learn to do a line, and it's kind of everything is done for you, not a line, but just removable appliances in general. But if you really want to understand how to move teeth, I think that 6-month smiles right now is teaching GPs a great way to be able to move them around. And for me, it's just as much aesthetic dentistry as veneers are. You really, in my opinion, can't call yourself an aesthetic dentist unless you know how to remove enamel and bond a veneer and know how to move a tooth so that you don't have to remove enamel if the case doesn't warrant it.
Because when you and I got out of school, your dad's a dentist. When we got out of school back then, when people had a bunch of crowding to do the veneer cases, they had to root canal teeth. They didn't blink twice of doing all these root canals and all this stuff. And when you go back to those cases that we saw in the 80s, we kind of thought, man, if you can't do ortho and unravel those teeth and stop having to do root canals on rotated, peg laterals and all stuff like that. I mean, so yeah, I don't think you can call yourself a cosmetic dentist if you can't do ortho along with bleaching, bonding, veneers, all that kind of stuff. Who's the CEO of 6-month Smile? Who owns that now after Ryan Swain sold it?
It's Perry Lowe. You might remember Perry. He was the CEO at Access Dental, the bird company. before they were acquired by Cavo Kerr. And so Perry was at Cavo Kerr for a while after Cavo Kerr bought Axis, and then he went over to 6 Month Smiles. And so they just provide this great service for dentists. They, like I said, that Confidex is digital treatment planning for the GP. So it's that kind of hand holding, like having a surgical guide for an implant. And then with the indirect bracketing, basically they're showing you exactly where to put it on, and it goes into place on the teeth right where they set it on the model. So they've taken a lot of the difficulty out of it. And again, as we both learned in ortho, you've got to get your team involved, Howard, because it's 99% of the work is being done by the team. That's why if you ever want to get jealous, you know, you mentioned the orthodontist making at least twice as much as the average GP. Go to their office and watch the assistants do all the work. In fact, you used to talk about ortho in your lectures. You say, look at what you guys will do molar endo, but you won't do ortho. You said, look at what's involved in ortho. It's like paper clips, it's glue, it's rubber bands. You used to say, you can buy this stuff at Office Depot. I don't even know why you need to be a doctor to do ortho. And so you used to say that, and it would make orthodontists angry, but now patients are doing their own orthodontics at home. So you were proven to be true, Howard, when you said, I don't even know why you need to be an orthodontist to do ortho. You don't. Patients are doing it at home.
I can't believe Perry Lowe is the CEO out of Dallas. He's been the owner of that thing. Is he the owner? I mean, is CEO? Is he the owner? He's been there 4 years, I see.
Yeah, he's been there 4 years. Yeah, he's the CEO.
Who owns it?
I believe there's some private equity money there. When Ryan Swain got out, he sold it to a private equity company, and they brought Perry on to run it.
Huh. Okay. Gosh darn, I'm almost running out of time with you. I only got a few more minutes. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up?
No, I just wanted to get the message out that 2-week temporary crowns suck. It's just not, it's not our best, easiest way to do dentistry. And so props to, like I said, 38smileslab.com. They're also very aggressive on their pricing because there's a small lab. You know, they do Bruxer, like I said, for with the Glidewell material. They do it for like $79 a unit. They do Emax for $99 a unit. So,
and to get that in 3 days, you'd really need to scan it.
It's going to make it 4 days if you send it overnight to them. So yeah, but mostly of what they get, I've been pretty impressed. Most of what they're getting is digital files from dentists. So dentist preps a crown, scans it, and they have it. You know, there's somebody sitting at a computer waiting for it to come in. 5 minutes later, they're designing it, and then they can be, you know, milling or pressing the Emax 2 hours later.
So what percent of their business is coming in via scan?
Oh, they're much higher than the average laboratory, I would say, just because of their connections and the dentists they know and me talking about them. I would say that 65% of what they're getting is digital scans.
65%?
Yeah.
And what do you think the whole U.S. market is on scans?
I don't know. I just know for Glidewell that it's around 18 to 20%. That's
still high, man. That is still high. And the iTero would work if you want to do Invisalign, and if not, then 3Shape and others. I want to just get some fatherly advice, because you and I now have you have 3 children. I have 4. You got any grandchildren yet?
No, thankfully. I mean,
what, do you want me to send them a book on how to do it? Come on, my 4 have turned into 5.
Howard,
but your 3 have turned into a donut. Nada.
I've done live demos for them. Nothing seems to help. Maybe I don't know if that's part of the problem. Well, none of them are married, so that's why I say thank God I don't have any grandkids yet.
Well, hey, but I just wanted you to end on some paternal advice if you're talking to one of your kids walking out of dental school, man. They say this. They say, Howard, you don't know what you're talking about. You and Mike graduated 30 years ago. Your dad probably graduated what? Would you know what year your dad graduated?
Yeah, 64.
64.
Yeah, 1864.
1964, and you graduated in 1988, and I was in 87, and now they're coming out in 2018. So you were 88 to 18, 30 years. Your dad was 30 years before you. I still laugh every time. I remember one time I first met you, you told me you wanted to be a dentist because your dad didn't work August, and you didn't care about every other variable known to man. You're like, dude, if you're a dentist, you don't have to work August. End of story.
It's beyond that. He took us to Hawaii for the entire month of August. So we went to Kauai for he just shut the door. We went for the entire, I didn't know if he was a dentist or a mid-level drug dealer. I didn't know what he did, but I knew I wanted to do that because none of my friends had spent a whole month in Hawaii. That's literally why I became a dentist.
Oh, I know. But they're saying that your dad graduated in the golden years. When I got out of school in '87, hell, I would send my bill to Delta, and they would just pay 50% on a crown, whatever my fee was. They pay 50% of the crown, 80% of the filling. Now Delta sends you the damn fee, and they're coming out of school $400,000 in student loans because so many of these dental schools now cost $100,000 a year. Including, I'm in Arizona. It only has 2 private schools: AT Still and Mesa. Midwestern Glendale. They're $100,000 a year. They're coming out $400,000 in student loans, and she's listening right now, and she's saying, Mike, forget all this technical stuff. I don't care about the difference between Bruxer and Empress and Empress 2. How do I pay my student loans back? That's the question. How do I pay back $400,000 in student loans? What would you tell her right now?
To go practice for 2 years at Pacific Dental, and to go get some experience and see what a really well-run fee-for-service practice looks like. In fact, if you excel within Pacific, you can be 5 years out of school and own, 3 or 4 practices if you're a real rock star and you're killing it and you're really into it. There are still dentists coming out today who are doing fantastic. There's still dentists coming out today who are struggling, and there's dentists who aren't happy with it either. I got lucky. I chose this profession for really superficial reasons and fell in love with it after the fact. I wasn't in love with dentistry because of teeth or enamel rods or anything. It was because of the vacation benefits, basically, and fell in love with it. So I would choose it all over again. But I think there's a unique opportunity with the rise of corporate dentistry to go practice somewhere. If you graduate from school and you've only done 6 crowns, that's silly. I didn't know anything, and I had done 25. I can only imagine after 6 what you must feel. I talked to a guy from the University of Pittsburgh. I said, how many endo procedures did you do? And he said 3. And I said, and you graduated? He said, yeah. I said, that's not very many. He said, I know. I really wish I would have got the chance to do a molar. I was like, you graduated from a U.S. dental school without doing molar endo? He said, well, I did one on an extracted tooth. I go, well, it turns out it's a lot more difficult when it's still attached to the alveolus and the patient. That's where the degree of difficulty really goes up compared to doing one in your hand. So if I was graduating today without a lot of clinical experience and confused about how I was going to pay these off, I would go spend some time in Pacific. That's my favorite corporate dental. Out of all the ones I've seen, that's my favorite corporate dental entity. And see what they're doing. Every one of them has a CEREC unit in it, so you'll get to do some same-day EMAX restorations and see how that goes without having to invest in it yourself. You can find out if you love the technology or don't like it or middling. They've got a great ability to compensate dentists. All Pacific Dental wants you to do, Howard, is treatment plan a crown and a half worth of treatment planning a day. So that's $1,500 a day if a crown's $1,000. And all they want you to produce is a crown and a half worth of production. So they have you'll be well compensated at Pacific Dental if you can just treatment plant $1,500 a day and produce $1,500 a day. And they have a hard time finding associates fresh out of dental school who are able to do that. And that's not a lot, as we know, that's not a lot of production. That's not a lot of diagnosis either. And so our students are coming out less trained and more in debt. And so I'm thankful that the corporate dental's around to help them get the rest of the training that they should have got in dental school and then be able to move on from there. So that would be my advice to my kids or any other young dentist is go, these aren't the corporate dental. Remember how bad corporate dental chains were when you and I got out of school? Now Pacific actually is up to 600 offices and they've got a CEREC unit in every office. That's unbelievable to me, that kind of commitment to technology. And patient service. They do 75% of their EMAX crowns same day. That's amazing.
And he was on the show. He was on Stephen Thorne, the CEO, 613, episode 613, if you want to see who you'd be working for. His dad was a dentist, and he basically thought, why the hell should I go to school 8 years to be a dentist? I'll just hire one. Amazing man, just a good guy.
His dad and my dad went to dental school together. And
at UFP?
At University of Pacific. And I just grew up thinking that the way to become independently wealthy was to, become a dentist. Steve, much smarter, realized the way to become independently wealthy was to have over 600 dental offices.
And the other thing I say, attitude determines your altitude. I mean, I know people that are working at Heartland or Aspen or whatever, and here they have the management systems to manage 600 offices. And most of the dentists I know can't manage their own office. And it's like, well, in the 2 years there, did you tell me about the systems? They can't even tell you the insurance code for a Crown or a Prophy. And I'm like, well, didn't you wine and dine your office manager? Didn't you get your regional director and become her best friend? I mean, my God, 1 year at one of these places, just if you just got the leftovers on how they manage 600 and take that to your own office, you'd be a light year ahead. Hey, Mike, I am out of time. We both have to go. Love you to death. Thanks for coming on for the 4th time. I've only had Gordon Christian on 3 times, and he's the god of dentistry. So you must be the god of the universe. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking to my homies.
Thanks, man. Let's do it again soon.